Hey guys, we're gonna get started with the webcast in about a minute or so. So we're just gonna take a minute just to make sure everything's working. But thanks for joining us. We'll be starting up soon. All right, guys, we're gonna get started in just a minute here. All right, guys, we're gonna go ahead and get started. We're broadcasting live from Mountain View, California. We're actually at the RethinkDB offices. To introduce myself, my name is Michael. I'm one of the founders of RethinkDB. And I have here with me today Daniel, who's our Director of Engineering.
Hello.
And Daniel, you may know him as Daniel Muse on GitHub. I'm M. Klukowski. So what we want to do today is we want to talk about the release that just happened today, RethinkDB 2.2. which is a really exciting release. The code name is Modern Times, after the great Chaplin movie. And that's because RethinkDB has come a long way. We've been building RethinkDB for a while. And at this point, it's a very full-featured system. So the focus of this release was largely about performance. There are a ton of fixes and changes that went on under the hood, really exciting ones. Daniel's going to talk about how those work and what you can expect to see in your production clusters. A lot of work went into performance for scalability, resource usage in this version, but most excitingly, we also added support for atomic change feeds. So if you've been using change feeds to build your real-time apps, where you can subscribe to queries within the database, one issue is that when you first want to start up the feed, it's hard to get the initial data from your tables. And so with atomic change feeds, you're able to seamlessly start up a feed, play back data that's already within the initial values that's already within the cluster, and then go on and continue through subscriptions. So it makes building scalable real-time apps a lot easier, lowering the bar for people to get started with RethinkDB. So with that in mind, we're taking questions on Slack. So if you haven't already joined us on Slack, you can go to slack.rethinkdb.com, sign up, join the organization. It should happen pretty quickly. And I'll be monitoring on Slack and IRC. We're at #RethinkDB on Freenode on IRC. And I'll be getting questions from you guys to be able to ask us about, it doesn't have to be just about the release, about anything, about ourselves, about the project, about things you have questions about with RethinkDB, where it's going. But the focus of today's talk will be about 2.2. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand it off to Daniel for now to talk about some of the new features.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
All right, so the first thing I would like to talk about, which we are really excited about, are the atomic change feeds that Michael mentioned. And I'm going to show you a few things here on a simple test table. So let me just switch over the video. All right, so let me first of all explain quickly what change feeds are all about in case you're not familiar with them. So RethinkDB is really optimized for building real-time applications. And what that means is that if you build an application, you don't just want to display static results, but you often want to react to changes in the data that might have been performed by other users or by events that happen in any connected systems. And with RethinkDB, we are making that really, really easy to do. And we actually allow you to build all of that on top of just a database and an application server without additional infrastructure. So I'm going to show you how this works real quick. So first of all, I have a small test table here, and we can now see at the bottom what's in this table. You can see there are 10 rows. It's a very simple table. It has very small documents. They simply have an ID, which is just a number right now. All right, so this gives us what's right now in the table. Now, if we want to know what changes in the table, RethinkDB provides a command which we call changes, simple as that. And I can put it at the end of this query. And if I run this, you can see that this looks quite different. So we don't see what's in the table right now, but instead it's telling us waiting for more results, listening for events. So this is a change feed, and it's now active. And in order to actually get some results from this, we actually have to change the data in the table. And I'm going to do that over here in the second window. And I'm simply going to go ahead and insert another document into the table. Let's put some string in here. Welcome to the RethinkDB webcast. And now once I run this, and I want you to put your attention on the first window, you can see that we get an update immediately on the change feed. And this tells us two things. We have an old value field, old val. This is now in this case, and that simply tells us that this particular document didn't exist before in the table. That's because I inserted it. If you would do an update, you would see the old value that the document had before you updated it. We also get a new value, which is more interesting in this case, and that's exactly what I inserted, the string welcome to the RethinkDB webcast, and also a primary key ID that RethinkDB generated automatically. All right, so what we have seen here is basically how change feeds worked in RethinkDB until 2.1, and you can still use it that way, obviously. But one particular thing is that you basically have these two different queries. You first have a query that tells you what the result is right now, what the data is right now. And then there's a second query that you run that gives you a stream of updates. So a very frequent use case for change feeds, it would be an application where you want to display some data from the database and you want to keep it updated in real time whenever it changes. And so you used to need two queries for this. And also, there were some edge cases that you had to handle, and I'm going to go into these a little bit more in a moment. But let me first show you how this works in RethinkDB 2.2 with atomic change feeds. So we added another option to our change feeds, and it's simply called include initial. So note that we are running the change feed query now. We are not running the plain table query. And I added this option, and so now once I run this, you can immediately see that we are getting some events here. And if I scroll down, this actually gives us all the data that's currently in the table. At the same time, you can see that it's still saying listening for events, so we have our active change feed. And if I perform another insert, for example, let me do that over here right now. So once I run this, we again get our updates. And this is really powerful and very convenient. I had a question.
Just that, you know, it looks like we're lagging a bit with the video, so let's just wait for it to catch up so that we're
on the same page. All right.
Perfect.
That's good to know. All right, so what you could see here is that we have now combined these two queries into a single operation. And what makes this particularly nice to use is that you get an additional guarantee that you didn't have before. So if you, for example, you think of a query that takes a while to run. For example, you might do something like, well, you might have your table, and then you might want to do some complex filtering on it or some map operation. And I'm just going to go ahead and put a simple filter here. For example, we might only be interested in documents with an ID larger than, I don't know, 7. So I put that here, maybe greater than 7. All right, so this should only give us the new documents and all the documents with IDs larger than 7. And of course, on this table with only 10 documents, or 12 by now, this is still very fast, but you can imagine, like if you have a large table, this might take a while to actually get streamed to your client. So if you would run an operation like that as a separate query and then register a change feed, there's a chance that somebody modifies the data in between or while you're receiving the initial results, and you would miss that change. So in effect, your application would display an inconsistent state of the data that actually never existed in this form in the table. So atomic change feeds avoid this problem. And let me just run one again. That was actually one command. Include initial is what we want here. All right, so again, we see all the initial results. And one thing that's really interesting about this is that RethinkDB makes sure that you don't miss any updates. So if you run a query that takes a while and changes happen, they will pop up on the change feed. And in fact, one thing that can happen is that if this takes a while, you might see some update notifications before you've seen all the initial results. But that actually makes it very easy to maintain a persistent state or consistent state of your data in your application. And again, if I add one other document, you can actually see here that you can distinguish between documents that are updates, proper updates, and documents that are part of the initial result. And the way you can do that is by looking at which fields they have. So updates will always have both an old value and a new value, while initial results will only have the new value field, because obviously there wasn't a previous value. That's just what was there when you ran the query. There's one more thing you can combine with atomic change feeds that I would like to show you really quickly. And that is the include states option. Include state. So if I run this, include states. All right. So if I run this, you can see that the latest document I received is now saying state ready. And what this tells us is that you have seen all the initial data, and whatever data you've received is now in a consistent state. And if you scroll down again and look at the bottom of the change feed, the first document that it actually sent us was saying state initializing. And those are the two states you will always see within atomic change feed. It will tell you when it starts sending you initial results, and it will tell you when it's done. And once you receive the state ready document, you will only get updates. All right. So the atomic change feeds work with basically all the queries that you can use change feeds on. And one more thing I'd like to show you is that we actually used this opportunity to make change feeds behave more consistently, which makes it easier for you to write applications that can handle different types of queries. So previously, if you would have done something like getting a particular document, let's say the document with the ID 1, and you would run a change feed on it, it would actually give you the initial result all the time. There was no way to influence that. And on the other hand, if you ran more complex queries like that on a table, this option wasn't available at all. So in RethinkDB 2.2, all change feeds behave exactly the same in this respect. And if you want the initial value, we have to use our option. And that's something to keep in mind if you migrate your application to RethinkDB 2.2. You might have to add this option to change feeds on individual documents. All right. So yeah, that's our atomic change feed feature.
While you're in the Data Explorer, I think you should show off one really cool little UI check that someone put into RethinkDB 2.2, which is actually really, if you know this, it makes it really exciting when you're just playing around. Which is, I'll let Daniel show this.
Yeah, I believe you know what.
We're talking about the same thing. So, exactly.
So what can sometimes be very useful is, for example, actually let me just put this changes back in here. So I now have this query, but maybe I first want to look at what the result is of some part of the query. And so one thing that's now possible in RethinkDB 2.2 is that you can select any part of a query, or any text that you have in the Data Explorer, and I can run only what's in the selection. So I selected our table test, and it gives me simply the current state of the table. If I select the whole thing, or select nothing at all, I again get the change feed. And this is very nice. You can write multi-line queries, for example, execute one at a time, look at the results, and kind of navigate through the intermediate results of your query that way.
As much as I love atomic change feeds, like that actually makes my day so much easier in the day-to-day sort of queries that you do. Yeah. So that's
it's a really neat feature.
Yeah, it is. Why don't you switch back from the screen, and then why don't we talk about some of the performance things that have gone into...
I would like to stay on the screen for a little longer because I would actually like to show you some of the performance improvements we have done.
Great. Awesome.
So as Michael mentioned, RethinkDB 2.2 had a lot of performance improvements. One quick thing that I want to show you is what happens if you create a secondary index. So previously, creating a secondary index on a production system was possible, but it was always a bit, it had a relatively high impact on your production workload. And we have improved that significantly by actually changing completely how secondary indexes are constructed. And let me just show you on this table of about 100,000 documents what happens if I create a secondary index. So obviously I don't have any load right now, but I just want to quickly show you another cool property of this new logic. So if I start creating a new index, we can see that it's building and it's making progress. So I'm now going to actually shut down the server in the middle of the construction. And if you watch where the progress is, you will see something very interesting soon. So let me terminate that. And I'm now going to start it back up. And what you would have seen with previous versions of RethinkDB was that the index would start constructing from scratch. But what you can see now is that it actually just resumes wherever it left off. So if you have very large tables, you can restart your service in the middle of a construction, and it just keeps going after you restart it, which is really nice for production setups. Maybe just to mention a few other things, we have significantly improved the performance of queries that use a between on a secondary index, something like, for example, a query like this with an index is going to be in the range of 50% faster than RethinkDB 2.2. We have also improved the performance of get all queries if you fetch multiple documents at the same time. So you can do something like this, and it will give you documents with all the IDs you specify. And this is typically going to be about 6 to 10 times faster in RethinkDB 2.2 than it was in RethinkDB 2.1. And we're really excited about that. And there are a bunch of other improvements. We have improved the scalability if you shard your table. We've also reduced memory overhead for large data sets, which is really interesting as you go into sort of more large-scale applications, and you might, like, once you start moving your setup over to production and you get a lot of growth and your application gets more and more users, this is something that's really important and that we are really happy about. All right, so these are just a few of the things. You will find more details on our blog post if you're interested in some of the other performance improvements we have in RethinkDB 2.2.
I think it even includes some graphs as well and some details about exactly the issues that were happening. So we have a bunch of questions that have come in. So I want to address some of them. I'll just interview you if that's okay.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead.
Switch to camera.
I think we are actually, yes. Perfect. Sorry, our producer here is telling us we need to switch to camera. Okay, so I'll just start from the top. Hendrik is asking, will the upgrades to change feeds make the Elasticsearch integration better? Because we used to have a river, and then we have a Logstash plugin, which I think Josh put together. And he's wondering if change feed upgrades will make that a better plugin.
Yes. So the answer is simple, yes. It will make it a better plugin. We haven't updated the Logstash plugin yet to make use of atomic change feeds, but that's going to happen in probably the next week. And indeed, this will make that a lot more robust because we can make absolutely sure that we don't miss any changes in RethinkDB when you copy from RethinkDB into Elasticsearch. And so, yeah, that's going to happen.
Perfect. And Hunter also asked a follow-up question, which is, what is the next upgraded change feeds? What is 2.3 going to do better? I know we've a lot of people talked about like they want change feeds on joins, restartable change feeds. What are some of the things we can expect?
Yeah, we actually have a lot of things coming up for change feeds. And just to mention a few, so one thing we are going to ship in the next release is a way to basically map write operations to events that you see on a change feed. And this is in particular useful if you want to, for example, use Meteor or other frameworks that give you optimistic updates on the client side, because that makes it very easy for the framework to know when a change has actually been reflected in the data. Some of the other things are, we're actually working on resumable change feeds. So if you intermittently lose a connection to the database server, which might happen, maybe somebody disconnects the network, or I don't know, there's some fluke in the networking system, you will be able to just continue streaming changes from wherever it has left off. Also, Michael mentioned change feeds on joins. Those are probably 1 or 2 more releases away. But that's something we're also definitely looking into, and which we are going to start working on very soon.
It's actually really exciting because optimistic updates are coming to more and more frameworks. I think that there's this thread on issue on GitHub, which is what you mentioned, correlating write notifications with timestamps, I believe, right?
Yes.
And I think that someone mentioned that they want to do an integration with Orbit.js as well, which I think also has optimistic updates.
Yeah.
So it's exciting because we're seeing more optimistic updates coming up.
Yeah. A lot of frameworks will be able to make use of that feature.
Yeah. Okay, so Timothy asks, why hasn't RethinkDB dominated database land, especially now that we have change feeds? I actually think if I were just to talk about that for a minute, I think that change feeds are incredibly powerful. But until we add things like, for example, atomicity and some of the other more full-featured things necessary to build like apps at scale with change feeds, we're going to see more and more people start to use them because there's been a couple blockers and we're removing those piece by piece. And our goal was to basically make it dramatically easier to build these kinds of real-time apps. RethinkDB is great as a general purpose database, but we see so many people really getting electrified about these building real-time apps with it. And our goal is to basically make building real-time apps easier than it is to build normal applications. And with some of the things we have coming out, we have a couple projects which are really exciting. I'm not going to go into full detail now because they're still in design stage. But there's been some discussion on the GitHub tracker. You can find me in Slack and chat about it if you're curious. But basically, our goal was to make it so easy to build these kinds of real-time apps, to be able to use the change feeds, to use all these features, that we think that it's really going to drive a lot of growth as well. But on the other hand, a ton of people are using RethinkDB. We just crossed the 10,000 star threshold on GitHub, which is awesome. We also have a ton of meetups popping up around the world. So there's a great meetup group in Utah. There's a great meetup group in London. We actually have, I'm going to be in Nashville this weekend. If any of you happen to be in Nashville, I'm going to be doing a talk at November on Sunday, the 15th. And actually there'll be a meetup at one of our users who uses RethinkDB, NextGXDX. And there's also a meetup happening in Toronto. So if you're in that area, I think it's happening on Saturday, November 21st. And there's a ton of awesome groups that are popping up around the world. Wherever there's like small clusters of RethinkDB users, there are like these really great meetups that are happening on a regular basis. So if you have any interest in starting one, if you think that there's like a few companies or teams that you like to just sort of share ideas, just come talk to me or talk to Christina, our community manager. Her handle is KittyBot on Slack. And we can send you a meetup in a box. We'll ship it to you and it'll give you everything you need to start your own RethinkDB meetup. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and move to another question we have here. Okay, so Dan Cannon, who, by the way, shout out to Dan for maintaining a fantastic Go driver, Rethink Go. So thank you, Dan. A ton of people I know use that in production, and it's a really great community around it. So his question is, do we have any plans for new pseudotypes? It's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't have any imminent plans for new pseudotypes. RethinkDB 2.2 doesn't add any new pseudotypes, definitely. So there are some ideas that we are discussing on GitHub. So for example, there's discussion about a pseudotype to represent a requel query itself, which will make some use cases really easy to implement and will be a very powerful addition to the requel language.
What are some of those use cases actually? Because I can think of a few of them, but I'd love to hear what you have
So
in
essentially it will allow you to store requel queries into a table and execute them as part of another query. And that might sound a little bit like something you might not actually need. But so some of the things you can implement on top of that are, for example, transactions and other very interesting variations of how you execute a query. Or you can do things like storing tasks into a table and having some external script that runs them at a particular time. And there's really a lot of things you can do on top of that. So that's something we're hoping to implement in a future release.
Perfect. I just want to mention just briefly, Henrik corrected me. It's not Rethink Go, it's actually Go Rethink, which is Dan's project. Also, shout out to Henrik for keeping us on point and always helping us figure out how to do things right here. He hangs out in Slack a lot, and I really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the next question we have. Actually, non-technical question I have for the team. Do we still play Dota?
Oh, that's a great question.
For the reason why this question is being asked is we originally had the server names that we would pick in RethinkDB. We're all Dota heroes because we had a lot of Dota players. I don't know. What are we playing these days? I think Fallout 4 is the one we're all really excited about.
We've moved on a little bit, but I think some of our team is still playing Dota.
Yeah, we play Dota at the office occasionally, and we all get very angry at each other. But that's like how it goes. That's the fun of playing Dota.
Yeah. Great question.
Great question. Yeah. If you guys want to join us, we could try to set up a LAN party sometime or something. Okay, so the Linux Glitch is asking, Alessandro, right? Alessandro, I believe, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is asking, what are we cooking for client-side integration?
Oh, something very exciting.
Something very exciting, yes. So we actually, if you go look up, there's an issue. There was a really exciting discussion happened because we're seeing a lot of really great innovation in the front-end world around things like React and Angular. A lot of ideas around GraphQL, exactly. A lot of ideas around how to do asynchronous real-time updates, like on the front end and on the back end, and how to actually shuttle data back and forth. And so, in exploring the idea of how to maybe support GraphQL directly through RethinkDB, there's a really great discussion. It goes through all the details. It's on the roadmap, but there are some things that need to get worked out first. Namely, the spec probably needs to be a little bit more fleshed out in some respects that we detail quite significantly in an issue. I don't have the issue number right now, but if you just search for GraphQL on the tracker, you'll find it. And you'll find there's a mention of a project that we're starting that basically will make it easier to build real-time apps directly on top of RethinkDB by offering an API that will live on top of change feeds, be built on top of change feeds, and will make it dead simple to be able to work with RethinkDB, but get started building a real-time app with the bare minimum, and then continue working and experience the full power of the database. So if you want to join that closed development process, we're keeping it closed just because when these things are getting started, it's really fragile. You want to make sure that the ideas are being explored fully, and we have a lot of people paying attention. It's kind of hard to be able to define the direction of it. But if you want to join the process, we're keeping it closed for now. We'll open it very soon. If you go to that form, there's a little Wufoo form that you can fill out to join the project, and we can add you to an organization. We try to keep it small for now. We're opening up over time. And you can help join, drive the direction of it, and help collaborate and maybe even build it with us. So hopefully it'll get a lot more exciting soon. I'm going to move on to another question here. So Dan Cannon is asking, excellent question. I know that Michelle is actually joining us on IRC, so shout out to Michelle. And he actually is the maintainer of RethinkDB Dash, which is a fantastic, progressive alternative driver for JavaScript. We have an official driver that we have, and the RethinkDB Dash is a great driver that offers a bunch of really exciting features like connection pooling. What else does RethinkDB Dash offer that's really exciting?
Actually, so one of the things I really like about RethinkDB Dash is that it allows you to auto-discover servers in your cluster. Yeah. So you just have to point it to one server, and it will automatically retrieve a list of all the machines and spread out the connections over them. And that helps you, for example, with keeping your application up and available because it can automatically switch over to new servers you might add to your cluster, do all of that automatically in the load.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest features that's really exciting about it.
Yeah, it's great. So the Linux Glitch was asking, Dan Cannon was asking what's the future of our driver in relation to RethinkDB Dash, which is a good question.
Yeah, I mean, in general, our driver is kind of it's very stable, and it's a slightly more conservative driver. but it always has full support, and we do very extensive testing on it. So if you want a driver that's really solid, that is guaranteed to work, that we provide full support for, then our drivers are probably the one to go. RethinkDB Dash is also tracking our development very closely. It's usually up to date. It works extremely well, and we know that a lot of users are actually using it in production environments. So it basically depends on which features you need. If you need a connection pool, then RethinkDB Dash is probably the better option. Otherwise, yeah, they're pretty similar in terms of regular querying functionality.
We are looking at adding connection pooling in some fashion to our drivers, though, correct?
Yeah, that's definitely something that's on our roadmap.
Yeah, it's something that we think is really important. Okay, so Henrik is asking, any idea when the Meteor team will add RethinkDB as an option? So there's a little bit of work to be done on our side and their side. On our side, Daniel mentioned some of the work that has to go. There's a few issues, some blocking things. Nothing too significant, but there's still some engineering work required. And on their side, we've been chatting with them, and hopefully in the near future, like we have every intention of helping that team get there. And so we just need to finish our work first, and then they'll do on their side. It should be pretty easy. Okay, so I'm going to pick up just a few questions because I'm just running through the questions we have in Slack right now, coming from YouTube chat right now. By the way, this is our first time using YouTube, so I apologize for any technical difficulties we had so far, but it actually seems to be working really great. We're really excited to use YouTube streaming as a future option for webcasts, which hopefully means we'll be able to do more of these on a regular basis because it's been actually pretty easy to set up and seems to be working fairly well. But please give us feedback. We really do appreciate it. So from YouTube chat, we have a question. Are there easy-to-use hosting services for it? For example, Mongo has Mongo Labs. I assume Elephant SQL is for Postgres. Yes, actually, the best and easiest way to run RethinkDB right now is on Compose.io. They offer hosted databases for a bunch of different databases. They're actually the first provider to provide RethinkDB. And they have really easy to get up and running with. They have a lot of expertise in maintaining RethinkDB. We have a close connection with that team. If you are interested in running it yourself, it is really easy to get started on something like Amazon AWS. We have a machine image. It's just point and click and it's running. Pretty much any cloud service that you have, it's pretty easy to get up running with RethinkDB in particular because there's an official Docker image that you can use. But if you're interested in having someone maintain it, manage it for you, Compose is a great option. They also just got acquired by IBM. So they're actually, I would say now they're on IBM's cloud service. Hopefully that addresses the question. I don't know if there's anything else to say about that.
Yeah, I just want to add, one thing that's really nice about Compose is that you get a full cluster of 3 servers out of the box, and everything just works, and you get encrypted access, and it's very nice to use.
It's actually, it's an important mention that it's 3 servers because with RethinkDB 2.1, which is the last version, we completed after about a year plus of work, we added automatic failover. So if you have a cluster of RethinkDB servers and a node goes down, it will automatically fail over to a new server. But that only works if you have at least 3 servers running because it requires the majority rule. And so basically, if you're running on Compose with 3 servers, you get automatic failover, which is the minimum that I would recommend for running a production RethinkDB cluster. Anything else to say about that? Perfect. All right. Let's take another question from YouTube chat. All right. So any improvements coming that will improve data consistency? For example, ensuring that there is only one username in the database. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can right now enforce uniqueness by using a primary key. And there are techniques that you can use like an auxiliary table to, for example, store separate documents where the username would be the primary key, and then you insert into that table to verify that the username isn't there already, and at the same time atomically you kind of reserve the username by inserting into it. All of that, of course, adds a little bit of complexity to your application. So unfortunately, providing constraints like that, uniqueness constraints across a cluster, is actually very difficult, and it comes with some performance penalties. It's something that we are definitely considering at some point. And we might use some distributed consensus protocols to implement that. But right now, for the next few releases, this is not planned. What we will probably provide pretty soon is a way to verify documents. So essentially, you can define certain criteria on your documents for a given table. And RethinkDB is going to make sure that, for example, particular fields exist, that they are of the right type, and things like that. So that moves us a bit further towards giving you constraints that you can enforce on the database side.
Awesome. Okay, one more question from YouTube chat. How well do change feeds scale? How many feeds can you run in a single box? Thousands, tens of thousands?
Yeah, so change feeds actually scale really, really well, and we have put a lot of work into making that happen. And so there are actually some production applications that use thousands and thousands of concurrent change feeds. Typically, like, you can probably run in the range of 10,000 change feeds on a single machine. That depends a little bit on what type of change feed it is, obviously, and how many updates are happening to your data. But that's definitely within the reasonable range that you can expect from RethinkDB.
I actually think at the San Francisco meetup last night, William from Sage Math Cloud, because he's running on RethinkDB, uses a lot of change feeds. Sage Math Cloud is a really cool. In production. Yeah, it's a really cool live. I think it's collaborative, right? A LaTeX environment in the cloud. So if you're like a student and you like want to write papers in LaTeX, like I remember doing it myself, and the tools were not very good.
Yeah, I can really recommend checking it out. I think it's an amazing application. I think it's sagemathcloud.com.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of students.
Cloud.sagemath.com.
I think if you Google it, you'll find it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he uses a ton of change feeds, I think, in his setup, and it scales.
Yeah, it's
nicely.
all real time. You can collaborate on different projects. It's very nice.
Really wish I had it when I was in college.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, so DM Payton is asking, we work with a lot of state and agricultural data, and GIS is a big thing for us. Any plans yet for additional GIS data types like multi-point, multi-polygon? They can hack around some of those types, or not support them at all, but having them native everything to be huge. Interesting, because you actually implemented yourself, which is one of a really cool project, but you implemented all the geo features for RethinkDB a while back. I forget which version it was, but
yeah, I think it was in 1.15 when we added geospatial support.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually really interesting to hear. So we didn't originally add support for these data types because we weren't quite sure how many people would actually use them. And so we wanted to get a product out first that would be useful to a lot of people, and basically see what the feedback was going to be. So we actually have an issue open about adding support for multi-point, multi-polygon data types. It's not currently scheduled for an upcoming release. But we can probably move that around. So it's out there.
You should actually just email us. Actually, find us on Slack and just ping us and we'll talk. Daniel Muse or M. Klukov.
Yeah, I would be really interested in hearing about your use case and how using geospatial data with RethinkDB.
By the way, if you guys are using RethinkDB, there's nothing I just love hearing more than just like user stories. So if you find me on Slack, just like ping me and say, here's what I'm building, and I love hearing these things. So please don't hesitate. So John Yarber, hi John, how are things? That's a great question, which is, what's the status on the Thinker stress ball? Is what I've been playing with right here. Where we got these little thinkers that we're making, that are little stress balls. Which is really great. As someone said, when you're working on a REQL query, you can just sort of sit and like just play with them to de-stress a little bit. So these guys are in production. They're shipping. They should be coming soon. So there are no dates yet, but we will have a way to get these guys from us, and they're actually quite a lot of fun to play with. Okay, so Timothy asks one more question. He asks about the front end tool that we're talking about, the client-side API. Will this be an API that would no longer require me to run my own backend app? It's a good question.
Yes, that is definitely part of the goal. We want to bring RethinkDB essentially directly to the front-end code, and we will put a lot of work into it to make it really simple to use without writing any backend code. That's definitely a central part of it.
But it's not going to eliminate the need for you. If you choose to use a backend, you still can do that.
Yeah, so it's actually going to be really flexible, and you can extend it whenever you need additional functionality. So it will give you a basis to build apps on top of, and once you need additional features, you will be able to extend it on the back end and on the front end.
Great. Okay, from YouTube chat, I think we addressed this earlier, but someone asked about tighter Meteor.js integration. That is planned. We're working on it. We have to build just a couple features to make that happen. And those things are all spec'd out on GitHub. I'm happy to chat with you on Slack if you have any questions about it. Okay, so Preston Marshall asks from YouTube, any news on the reduce aggregation features of change feeds?
Yeah, that's another thing that that is coming up as an extension for change feeds. I can't promise right now in which release we will have that, but it's basically right after right after change feeds and join that will be on the roadmap, and yeah, it's something that's in the pipeline.
Okay, so Zenwolf asks, do we have a date for the Jepsen test, and do you look forward to it? We absolutely look forward to it.
Yep.
We love the Call Me Maybe series. It's great because what's really exciting is that in the past few years there's been so many more resources for people to think about infrastructure software in a different way, where they actually can like understand really complex problems. And people like AFR have been doing a great job of documenting it. And helping it be accessible, so you can ask the hard questions that you really need to ask to be able to evaluate a product. Not how does it work when it works well, but what happens when things go wrong. And so the test is it's ongoing. I don't have a date for it yet, but we look forward to it, and we think it's going to work really nicely. In particular, because when we were picking our consensus algorithm for RethinkDB, we like took our time building automatic failover because we wanted to do it correctly. And we ended up picking Raft because as the consensus algorithm because it is vetted, tested, and we're excited to see what the test will show. But it should be coming soon. Let me see what else we got here. You guys feel free to keep asking questions. We still have some time. I think we're doing okay so far time-wise. Let's see here. And yes, by the way, whoever's asking in Slack, that is Settlers of Catan in the background. We're huge fans of Settlers and Dominion. We play a lot in the office, actually. Okay, so I'm going to give us just a minute to see if there's any other questions that are going to come in, either from IRC, YouTube chat, or from Slack. I just want to mention a couple things while we have a few minutes. We've been posting a couple videos because a lot of people have been asking us, how are people using RethinkDB? What are the kinds of things they're using it for? And so the first thing that we did, we're going to do full write-ups soon. But we've been posting these awesome series of YouTube videos with companies that are using RethinkDB in production. We call them real-time stories because it's just a story of how people are building these kinds of real-time apps. And there's a bunch of really exciting companies. For example, Jive Software built a Slack competitor called Jive Chime for workplace communication, and they built the real-time component with RethinkDB rather than building it themselves. I mentioned NextGXDX before, which does the genetic testing marketplace, and they do a lot of work with RethinkDB and the real-time features to make sure that it's all the data they have is current. Client Success is another great company that uses the real-time features for data sync. Compose.io uses us actually themselves. There's a ton of other exciting companies and projects and teams that are coming to us and saying, we want you to tell your story. So if you have any interest in, if you think you have a really exciting case, we'd love to talk about featuring you in one of these stories. But also if you're on a team and someone's like, well, who's using it? This is a really great way to give them something to show. Well, these are the teams that are using it. This is what they're building with it. Another thing that we've been doing this for a while, but it's probably one of the best parts of our day, which is when we get an email from somebody from our Shirts for Stories program. If you go to rethinkdb.com/community, there's a big bold link which states that you can click a link and get a free t-shirt. All you have to do is tell us how you're using RethinkDB. And it's great because I have seen a lot of these shirts in the wild now. I'll just be going off on my day across the country. I will find somebody who's wearing a RethinkDB shirt. And that always is a good excuse for a conversation. But also, it helps us just learn how people are using them, or using RethinkDB in production. So if you have an exciting project, just something you built yourself, something your team is working on, just go ahead, tell us how you're using it, and we'll make sure you get shirts for you and your team. Let me see if there's anything else I want to share with you guys right now. The one last thing I'll say about community is, I mentioned this before, but if you want to run a meetup in your area, if you're excited about RethinkDB, there's a couple new meetups that are starting up around the country and around the world. Go ahead and reach out to me or to Christina Keelan, KittyBot, and she'll get you set up with this meetup in a box that we talked about. That you has a bunch of shirts, a bunch of other goodies that are helpful. Okay, one more. Let me see any more questions we have here. Okay, one more from YouTube chat. How big is your development team? I'll let Daniel talk about this since he's the engineering manager. So
yeah, we are actually 17 people right now at RethinkDB. About half of us are engineers. So it's still a pretty small team, but it's also extremely nice actually to work here. I really enjoy the environment, and we're very productive, as you can obviously see with our releases. Yeah.
Everyone here really cares about building like the open source project. We all care about RethinkDB a lot. I also want to say, just on that note, I'll take a moment for a plug. We are hiring, in particular, if you're a systems engineer and you're looking to hack on internals of a database, you should go ahead and just email us at jobs@rethinkdb.com because we're always looking for really great people. But everyone here, we all work in a way. If you guys haven't followed us yet on GitHub, you can see every issue we talk about. We do all work directly on GitHub issues. So you can just follow our progress, watch the project. In fact, if you haven't yet, it really helps. Go start the project yourself on GitHub. Every star gets us more visibility. We just crossed the 10,000 star threshold a few weeks back. We're nearing 11,000. Might actually hit it with this release. And it really helps just spread the word about RethinkDB. But if you want to follow the progress and learn about some of the features, propose something, it all happens in GitHub issues. And so you can see everything that we're talking about and get involved in the discussions. I know a lot of the people who are here in Slack with us today do that on a regular basis. And honestly, guys, it's like one of the greatest parts of this job for all of us is working with you guys. And RethinkDB 2.2 included a lot of contributions from external contributors. And we're very grateful for that. So let me see if there's any other questions we have. Someone asked if we do interns or co-ops. Unfortunately, we don't. The reason why is because RethinkDB is a very deep product, and it's difficult with an internship to be able to get in and out and to build something that's that feels good at the end of the internship. But when you're finished with school, come talk to us when you graduate. We'd love to chat. Okay, let me see. If there's anything else we have here? I think that's it. Daniel, is there anything else that you feel you want to talk about with this release?
No, I think I'm good. I just want to add that you should definitely download RethinkDB 2.2. It has, as we mentioned, as we've seen, a lot of new features. It also has all the performance improvements. And we also have a bunch of smaller features that are just like that we didn't have time to go into here. But if you look at our release notes, you will see the full list. And there might be something in there that even if you're not going to use atomic change feeds, that you might find useful for your application. So yeah, I can just recommend checking out the release notes and our blog post on it. And yeah, I think that's
Perfect.
all. Thank you very much.
I have one more question from Mohammed, which is, I think as this feature's been on his mind for a while, and I think it's actually really exciting, memory tables.
Yeah.
Yes. Can you talk about what they are?
All right.
And
so,
if they're forthcoming anytime soon?
Yeah, of course. Right now you have exactly one type of table in RethinkDB, and it's always going to be stored to disk. It's for persistent data. And so for certain applications, there are use cases where you don't actually need data persistence, right? For example, you want to manage sessions in a web application, or you want to use a RethinkDB table simply for making use of change feeds. Like if you want to pass messages from one part of your application to another, you can do that through a RethinkDB table. But so in cases where you don't actually need the persistence, it would be enough if the data was stored in memory, and it would give you some performance benefits, especially if you have a write-heavy workload on those tables. And so yeah, that's something that is coming up. And yeah, we hope we will be able to release that in probably not the next release, but hopefully the one after that.
Great. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it for what we have to share with you guys today. I want to thank you all for joining us. It's been actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you very much.
But I want to if there's a couple things just to finish with. If you haven't yet, as I mentioned, go start the project on GitHub. It helps a lot. You can follow us on Twitter to find out. We might start doing more of these webcasts on a bi-weekly or weekly basis, try to get into some REQL queries, things like that, because this setup seems to be working well for us. So if you're interested, just come talk to us on Slack, and you should join us on Slack if you haven't yet. That's at slack.rethinkdb.com. There's a really awesome group of people, great community there. It's becoming very quickly an indispensable part of our community, and it's a really positive group of people as well. So I think that's pretty much it. Thanks for joining us, guys, and we'll see you next time.